Thank you for your patience. Morning, everybody. Welcome to our webinar, which is all about Headless and migrating to Headless. Thank you for tolerating the various technical hitches we've had today. We were originally going to do this on Teams. We decided to do it on something else. But anyway, we're now back with Teams, which seems to be working okay. So, look, it's a pleasure to welcome you all to our webinar today. Very grateful for you spending the time. If you're watching the recording, and by the way, it probably won't be the same recording, which we share with people, but please feel free to add questions to the chat as we go through. We will try and answer either throughout or at the end. I'm James, I'm the Commercial Director at Codehouse. I'm joined by my colleagues, Joe and Fred, who will pick things up shortly. The idea of today's webinar is that although there will be some technical talk, our aim is really to position Headless much more in a business context, and that's both commercially and operationally. So we don't really want to talk about Headless in terms of it's better and it's faster and it's easier, but we do want to talk about it in terms of how and why it will make you more successful at what you're trying to do. How much more can you sell? How much time can you save? We're also going to talk about options, so looking at how potentially you can migrate to Headless in more of an iterative manner, as opposed to having to rebuild the entire web infrastructure from the ground up. And as we'll see an example we talk about later, it really allows you to try and see the benefits of and realize the benefits of Headless in a much more rapid fashion. Headless isn't by any means a new term. It is one that's been around for a while. It's sort of morphed from initially being about separating the content layer from the presentation layer. One of the main benefits of that being you could actually render the pages on the site to the visitor at the point in which they showed them, so it was enabling things like personalization. But now really it's evolved into something that's really more about having many heads. So maybe we should come up with a new term for it, such as headnostic, or even if you want to go really crazy, headagnostic. But to set the whole thing in context, we're going to start off with a brief explainer about Headless as involved into what sort of a modern Headless experience is. And we're going to talk about the potential advantages and challenges it can bring. We're then going to go and provide some insight. We have a video from about a recent project that we delivered that was both rapid and rewarding. Very briefly, so we're now in our 17th year, so we've been going quite a while from the very, very early days of Headless. We've got offices in London, Sydney, New York, and Colombo, and we're very much focused on the design and the delivery of websites, as well as other sort of digital applications and products. All about driving value for our customers, of course, and you can see sort of some of the very wide and eclectic range of projects that we've delivered over the years. So now we've actually got going successfully. I'm going to hand over to my colleague Joe to pick up the next bit.
Thanks. Hi, I'm Joe, front-end lead at Codehouse. Well, that means day-to-day I'm involved in building the interfaces which end users interact with, usually a website. We'll talk a bit about the evolution of Headless. As James said, it's not something that's just popped into existence overnight. It's an architecture that was developed to address real needs. So if you move the slide on for me, James. So previously you would have had a monolithic architecture. So there's everything in one place, one bit of software which will do absolutely everything that you need. It will be your entire website. It may be many websites bundled into that one bit of software. Everything is in one place. And that's not an issue for a small organization with basic requirements. You may just have one website and it only does one thing. Not a problem at all. It's a fine way to be. But as your organization grows over time, so will that application until it becomes incredibly unwieldy. And I'm sure we've all suffered some of that pain at some point in our careers. You want to release a new feature or make a change to a particular feature, and its seemingly unrelated features are entangled with it. Your development team are slowing down, they're complaining, or, well, I can't make a change here because it will affect over there. You end up regression testing the entire website for a change to one small part of it. Your QA teams are saying, well, that's going to take us more time. We need to look at the entire website. You've changed one small piece, but actually it's affecting over there as well. You find that parallel work streams are very difficult to manage. You think, well, surely I can develop a feature over there and I can do something else in parallel over there. Well, no, you're touching the same code base. You end up with conflicts and development teams saying, well, no, we've got to finish this before we can start on that piece of work. And your project managers end up tearing their hair out about it. So you then find, well, actually, we really do want to interact with another application, be it a back office system or what have you, that can't be brought into this monolithic application. So you end up writing custom APIs to allow integration with those other systems. And all in all, what started off just a fairly basic, simple proposition has become a huge thing which nobody particularly is able to work with in a performant and efficient way. The other concern that you'll have is that they are often walled gardens. You'll buy into a particular piece of software, and the vendors of that software will guarantee that they'll support particular products that they've developed, and those are the products that you can use. And if you want to integrate with anything else, it's likely to be a difficult process. So those products may suit your needs, they may not suit your needs, and really you don't have much choice in the matter. So you often find that the CMS itself is extended and customized. And that's all well and good until you come to needing an upgrade, for example. Perhaps it's going out of support. Perhaps there's a security vulnerability that's been identified. These are normal things that happen to normal software in a normal life cycle. But upgrading customized software is never easy, and it tends to get just put on the back burner. So we'll do that later. We'll do that later because actually that's a lot of investment and a lot of time and money, and we don't feel like we're really gaining anything for it. And then suddenly you have a security vulnerability identified and your hands forced. It doesn't make anybody feel good. It doesn't make developers feel good. It doesn't make the business feel good. So any kind of customization to these products is a risk. And then finally, there's no separation of concerns here. So your content, your presentation, your business logic, they're all closely coupled in this one application. And if, for example, you want to introduce a new microsite or a new website that uses very similar content, but presents in a different way, perhaps with some different rules around it, you'll find that your content editors end up replicating that content. So, well, okay, this piece of content, it's the same as that content, but it's slightly different for this particular case. So I'm going to have to make a copy of it. And that's not efficient. It's not efficient for them. It's not efficient for the business. So these are challenges that hopefully everyone can recognize that they're not an issue if you're a small business, if you've got a simple premise that really you're just doing one thing. But as you start to grow, the complexity grows exponentially, and you really do start feeling the pain. So over the years, and as James said, headless is not a new concept. It's something that's evolved over a period of time. People have been trying to work on ways to solve these issues. You know, how can we structure things differently? How can we use better products for specific tasks that actually suit our needs? So if we move on, James, I'll give an introduction to the headless architecture. So headless, it forms part of an architecture with looser coupling. It allows disparate head applications to serve content in the right format to the end user. So you haven't got 2, 3, 4, 5, 20, 50 websites crammed into one application. You've got your headless CMS that forms the bottom layer here, and it is just serving content. And that's all it does. And it's a great product for serving content. That headless CMS is connected to the outside world, if you will, via that API layer. And then you have your head applications at the top there. What I like about this graphic is it shows the head applications are disparate. They're in size and number. They're not all necessarily websites. They may be a mobile app, maybe just an internal portal, maybe a microsite or a campaign site that's just built to serve one niche function over and above your main www website. So a head application, as we call it, we're talking about headless, but a head application is the other part, right? It's anything that the end user interacts with. Now, that looser coupling, it allows for a more composable approach. So you're free to choose the CMS that suits your needs. You're free to choose the head application framework that suits your needs or the needs of that particular application. Excuse me. That you can build with the framework that your team understands, and every agency is going to have their preferred framework that they know how to use that's given good results for them. But it's important to be able to choose the product that suits you, and you're free and able to do that. The only contract that you have is that API layer. The head application needs to be able to talk to that API that the headless CMS exposes, and vice versa. The headless CMS doesn't care what your head application's written with or the structure of the end presentation. It just cares that it can talk to it via that API. And that's really critical, that you're then free to make your own decisions about what works for you. So there are many headless CMSs. The market has evolved over the years and matured. They all vary slightly in their USP. Some are very focused on serving sort of individual content items. So you'll have just a big pool of articles, for example, and each article has the same structure, has the same fields, and really their focus is on being completely agnostic as to where that content may be used and the surrounding structure. Others are more focused on a sort of more traditional website feel. So their focus is on building a page. Now, they don't care what that page looks like, but they do give some more structure around it. So you have the ability to use the correct tool for the correct job. And again, that really depends on your needs. And if you say you get to the point where you think, actually, we've got all this content here, but that really works for this kind of application, but that application needs a slightly different structure. You're free to use more than one headless CMS if you really want to. There's no rule around it. That flexibility is very, very powerful. So I think we'll leave this there, and I'll hand over to Fred to outline the challenges and advantages.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Joe. So let me just get to share my screen. I'm just going to take control of the presentation. So hi, everyone. Great to meet you all. Thank you for being there, and thank you for watching, otherwise the recording today. So I am Fred. I'm engagement director here at Codehouse. So basically what I do is I look after all of the account and delivery side of things. So I have a very strong experience and years of experience into digital transformation and technology. Today, I want to take you through a bit more things focusing on business, right? I want to talk about the business and what headless means to a business. We're going to talk about various different things in there. I try to not do this by PowerPoint. I don't want to have like hundreds of slides, so we kept it to a minimum. But the idea is really to talk about how headless can help you, or not necessarily address, but help you address some potential problems and challenges you're having within the business. But before we do that, I just want to spend a few minutes to just talk about composable DXPs. DXP is another one of these amazing acronyms that seems to be coming and flourishing every year. So we talked in the past about CMS, we talked in the past about ERPs and DAMs and CRMs, and CDPs come recently, and now DXPs. No matter how familiar you are, DXP is digital experience platform. So old school CMS have evolved over the years, and Gartner and other kind of big entities in the industries have recognized now a new product as digital experience platform. And what this means is the ability for larger content management systems and solutions to leverage loads of API-based individual marketing capabilities. So if we look at this chart, and it's, again, nothing is going to be technical here. I'm really not going to talk about any technical details, but the main idea there is to think about, okay, when we talk about heads, and Joe talked for a few minutes about heads, that's what you have here on the top. So it's all of the different websites, all of the different end channels that you may have to serve your content. So when I talk about content over the next 15-20 minutes, I'm going to talk about content in the large sense of the term. I'm not talking about words. I'm talking about any type of content, because headless is not just about CMS, right? Headless could be about your headless DAM. It's about images. It's about potentially videos. It could be about like headless commerce, about products and headless checkouts and all of these things like Shopify is doing now. So this is really around the different channels that you want to serve any headless content to. So that could be your brand website, that could be your affiliate sites, that could be sub-brands, that could be local brands, that could be social content, Facebook, LinkedIn or TikTok, that could be emails, that could be loads of different things, internal content, external content. It could be also, for example, IoTs, but also eventually digital kiosk and point of sale. So let's say, for example, you're launching a new product, you have an online campaign to get people excited to register on social, you want to push a form and content to social, but also you have a point of sale activation. And you want to have a point of sale kiosk where users can go, test the product, see the product, and eventually register to get a free sample or anything like that. This is all the different means that you can serve content to different endpoint and channels. Mobile apps as well, whether it's native, whether it's PWAs or hybrid or anything you want to consider. This is also another type of endpoints. And endpoints are actually illimited. Endpoints grow over time. It could become a screen in the plane. It could become so many different things that now, especially like with the Euro Cup, it could be advertising banner in stadium. It could be so many different things. And that's kind of very important to understand what we mean by endpoints, by websites. On the right-hand side and kind of the left as well in green, you have all the kind of different headless and marketing technology you might be using. So the digital asset management, any kind of old school ERPs or bigger ERPs for finance and inventory and warehouse management, or CRM for all of your customer records, or CDP for all of your customer data platform information, or personalization, anything you might want to use. So it could be any of your MarTech capabilities. But the thing I really want to call out today is try to demystify a bit the things that everyone is kind of mentioning, but never really talks about and articulate as much as I sometimes think should be, especially talking about API layer and integration platform in the middle here. You will hear from many vendors. They'll say, our system is API driven, it's API built. You can surface any content out. And that's great. And that's what you want. But also, when you're moving into headless as a whole, you have to start thinking into what's your strategy for your marketing, for your technology, for your applications, where you are now and where do you want to go? Because starting with a one-to-one integration, like your brand website to your headless decouple, that's a simple one to do. But then if you factor in DAM in there, or then you factor CRMs or your CDPs or anything else that you want to add after that, it becomes a very complex one because you end up having lots of point-to-point integrations between all of these systems. An API layer, integration platform in the middle, allows you to standardize and be the source of authority and the source of truth, as your headless CMS is your source of truth for your content, and your DAM is source of truth for your imagery and assets and videos assets eventually. Your API layer becomes your source of truth for integration. How do you pass data between systems so you can build it once and not build it many, many times? Another key thing I want to call out also in that kind of DXP landscape is the importance of design system. Design system is a small thing, but it's basically a representation and a way of becoming your brand and design source of truth. So all of your endpoints, all of your sites, if even printed materials, but your website or anything else, you want to make sure that your branding and your user experience is consistent throughout your customer's journey, whether they're online or offline. And the design systems is really where you will be able to start defining all of your brand and web guidelines, and that you can then easily share with your internal teams or with agencies and partners you're working with to help them say, okay, if you are to use our logo, use it this way. If you are to build a content page, do it that way. This is our grid. These are our margins. These are our paddings. This is a font. This is a font size. This is what's authorized. This is what's not authorized. It's giving them all of these basic assets so they don't have to every single time rebuild the whole HTML for a new campaign page they want to do for point of sale activation. They can just say, okay, I'm going to get that. I'm getting the CSS and the HTML, and I can just start building my things very quickly instead of having to spend a couple of days just redoing it from scratch every single time. It's really simplifying and enhancing your design and build process. And the last thing also is data lake. Like all of this is great to have all of these environments, but what you want to make sure is that you can aggregate all of this integration into one environment where you can really build dashboards and get real insights from your data, because nothing is worse than having some of your experience or data in Google Analytics and some others in some other environments or in your CDPs. You want to understand and have like this kind of 360 view of your customers and of their behavior. So all that being said, that's really kind of setting the scenes for the position of headless and why it matters to your MarTech and to your kind of long-term strategy. So now I'm going to talk about a couple of things. And the first thing we're going to go through will be something that wasn't necessarily as much on the agenda, but I just thought it would be good to approach it this way. It's more about pain points. So I want to talk about potential business pain points where headless can help and where headless could be part of the solution. And I'm weighting my words. I'm saying could be part of the solution. It is not necessarily the solution, and we'll talk about that a bit later. I split it in 3 different things. So digital and web, IT and operation, and then marketing and editorial. So in digital and web, you could be struggling potentially with, and again, I've tried to do a 3x3 rule. So I picked up 3 because I could have like hundreds of those, right, in each section. Just try to get to the ones that I think were quite relevant to today's topic. So are you struggling with potentially distribution of content to multiple sites? So we talked about that. I'm not necessarily going to spend a huge amount of time on this again, but the idea is basically if you have multiple sites where you want to push your content and you don't want to have to redo your content every single time, headless is definitely one of the architecture that will help you improve on that or solve some of that problem. Do you have issues with Web Vitals? So Web Vitals, everyone's talking about Web Vitals, and everyone's talking about Google's performance core and all of this. So I'm going to treat those 2 together because they really go together, like Web Vitals, performance, SEO, they're all together. Do you have issues with your Web Vitals, with your site's performance? Is it slow to load? Is Google telling you that your TBT is 2000 milliseconds because it's throttling it down a lot and you don't understand whether your site is actually slow or whether it's perceived as slow? All of these different things are things where headless and decoupled architecture can really help you. And again, we'll talk about that in more details in a few minutes. Other pain points you might have from an IT and operations standpoint: scaling. Scaling is so important. Your traffic today is not your traffic of tomorrow. If your business is successful If your business is growing, your traffic is going to grow. You will need to scale. You need to be able to enhance, and you might have challenges currently into doing so. Or you might have also challenges with your dev and operation as a whole. Maybe it's costing you a lot of money to maintain and support your application or upgrade multiple versions of your software. Like we'll talk about, and we'll have some words from Argus Media in a few minutes, but it's one of the challenges they had as well. We had to do with them, we had to do an upgrade of their cycle environments from 8 to 10.2. That's not a simple effort. That's a big work. And you might want to try to think about not having that or reducing the need for doing all of these patches and improvements over time. But also, you might want to think about enhancing your security. You might have issues with security. You might be worried about security. You might be worried about some of your data and database being potentially exposed. Well, again, this is something where Headless can really not solve the problem. It's not going to prevent you from being DDoS, but it can really help into simplifying your recovery process or into reducing the risk of corrupting your database and your data as a whole. Last side, but not least, is about the marketing and editorial side of things. You might have challenges and might want to simplify your workflows, or maybe actually you don't have any workflows. It's just people editing content, publishing, and you have no control over that. And you want to understand a bit more and control a bit more what's happening without making it too daunting. You might have challenges with managing multiple languages and countries easily. It might be a very complex effort for you as you grow, your marketing team grows, your local team grows, you have always this challenge of global versus regional versus local, and all of this can be quite complicated and become quite a daunting task as well. And finally, you may struggle with maintaining your brand identity, and you may struggle with controlling how your brand is perceived and how your brand is managed across all of the online and offline digital user journeys, right? So you might struggle, you might end up in these situations where you're going through a website, you click somewhere on, I want to register for this competition, and then it looks nothing like the branding that you've just spent time on the main website and going through. It's nothing like it, to a point where sometimes, and you may laugh about it, but maybe you've had this where sometimes you end up on one of your older sites, which actually looks like maybe someone's trying to impersonate your branding, right? So how do you control that branding? You may have challenges into controlling your branding across all of your channels. But the thing is that's where Headless can help. Again, Headless has loads of advantages and has loads of different kind of string to its bow, right, if I may say, and lots of things that it can really help and can really do. And the first one of those being focusing on the content. Headless really allows you to think about content before you think about what it looks like. As we said, Headless is about doing your work. And if you do, for example, your product inventory, you don't want to have to think about how your size and centimeters or pictures or everything is going to be displayed on your web shop. You don't want to think about that. You just want to care about, I need to do my data input to make sure I have the right weight, the right dimensions, the right descriptions, the right information for my product. It's about being able to focus on the right thing. And it's about being able to think content over your kind of end presentations. Another important point also to consider where Headless can help is SEO and performance. So again, modern framework, Next.js, but there are many others. Next.js is one that we favor quite a lot here at Codehouse. Do improve a lot on the performance and SEO, because they are really built for SEO, right? They are built to support and simplify your SEO structure. They are easier to build upon. They're easier to be understood by search engine and crawling bots, and that's also like an out-of-the-box benefits that you're getting from starting to simplify. You don't end up with complicated HTML and code that like Google crawlers might struggle into reading and parsing. You end up with something that they can easily understand and get their way to. But again, the point about the performance is also a key point about caching, and that's because by moving into Headless and Next.js, you will have static site generation. You'll have much better use of caching capabilities. Your site and your pages are not built as the user is clicking and then making requests to your database and surfacing the content and clicking on the next button, surfacing the content again from database. static site generation allow you to cache part of your site. Again, that can be configured, but that allows you to have something that actually lighter and easier to load and navigate through instead of exposing database and making it very slow, which actually leads us to the improved security, right? Just talk about database exposure. Well, read-only APIs and separation, static site generation really help in avoiding having exposition of your internal databases or your site's databases, having someone potentially finding their ways into them. So it's not going to solve all security, but it's really going to help by the architecture and the principle of it's really going to help and improve things as a whole. So we talk about one of the pain points around scalability. Again, everything being cloud-based with Azure and AWS and other hosting providers. Everything being really cloud-based now, you can kind of scale up and down at the click of a button. You don't have to set up a new database and do all the complicated like deployment process and all of these things. It becomes much more simple. It's like very simplified way of managing things, and it's almost really user interfaces rather than big heads down deployment and structural changes. Customizable front end as well. Obviously, because you have your head applications that are separated from your headless content and content as a whole. Again, I'm really talking generally content. Each application can really think about how it displays the content based on what it needs and how it needs to display it, and not have to worry about trying to find its way around styling a complicated HTML that it doesn't need to understand. So this is really helping you to leverage the right experience on the right device or on the right channel without having to worry about how the content is, how the HTML and the structure of the content is. But then finally, on the kind of where headless can help in the multilingual management side of things, having a headless CMS, again, as in the example, is really helping you into controlling your content into one place, which makes it much easier to manage your hreflang, for example. And I'm sure many people on the call today or watching this webinar would have gone through this situation in the past where sometimes US traffic will start cannibalizing traffic for UK or other English-speaking or primarily English-speaking countries like Northern European countries. I've been in the past in situations where US website was cannibalizing 75 or 80% of the Swedish, one of our Swedish brands website, because everything was being indexed for the US was much bigger. It's a much bigger market. So Google was saying, hey, like, it's just normal to direct people to that website. Well, actually, it didn't have the right product for the local market. So managing your hreflang is fundamental, and that is really enhanced by being able to have a system that tells you to say, okay, this is my page, US page, and this is a version of my page in Sweden or in Finland, and this is a version of my page in the UK, and this product is just for the UK, but not for the US. Managing all of this complicated relation between your content is much easier in that type of architecture than having 10 different sites and then having them compete with one another, because that becomes a real headache and nightmare to maintain over time. So we talked about how headless can help. We're going to talk about things to look for. I didn't want to approach this as saying headless has disadvantages or anything. It's not really about disadvantages, because everyone has a different opinion on that. And I didn't really give the advantage. I just said, I'm just talking about how headless can help. But the main thing now is really to talk about things to watch out for. I've been through so many kind of programming transformations where like pitfalls are not really realized early enough. And you end up in that situations where you're actually blaming the technology for not working. Well, actually, you didn't think about everything else. And the first thing I want to call out, and there's a reason why I put that first, it's so important, it's the change management. You have to align people, process, and technology. And that's not just like a fuzzy sentence I'm putting there, right? It is so fundamental. A system is a system. It does something. How you use it is way more important than what it actually is. As Joe mentioned, there's so many different type of headless CMS existing out there and headless application existing out there. And each one of them is kind of putting a focus or emphasis on some different things. But ultimately speaking, none of them are going to work if you don't change how you're working, if you don't change your process and the way that you manage your content and you manage your environments and your processes. Brand consistency. I did touch on that a few times, but ensuring you have a structured branding system is so important. That's usually one of the pitfalls that you end up having, because if you don't end up having a design source of truth and a real design system in place, then everyone's going to say, oh, I'm just going to build my own version of that microsite here and there, and they're all going to look completely different. But you don't want that. You want to structure that. You want to control that. And if not control, you want to help have a source of truth to inform individuals working on your brand, working on your digital ecosystem, inform them and say, this is what you should do, this is how it should look like. So again, Headless is not going to solve this. Headless is going to help you get in a situation, a structure, and an architecture that will facilitate and make this simpler. But if you don't manage your branding in this central way, and you don't have the right authority around managing brandings and changes to your branding over time, then obviously, yes, it's going to fall at some points, because it needs to be a consistent effort of your process and technology and people. But then when we talk about Headless, we also talk about content structure. This is also very, very critical. It's so important. Moving into Headless content and Headless CMS is really about changing the way that you structure your information. A news item, a news article is not a news article anymore. A news article is a title with a short description, with a long description, with a published date, with a last edit date, with an author. It also has a body content which comprise of sections. Each sections can have an image and a headline and a description and a list item. You need to look at, and how you break it down is down to you and how in your business, but you have to think about breaking it down. Because the way that you're going to break it down and the way you're going to manage your content is going to be allowing, it's just a way that is going to allow you to customize it on your heads. So if you have one article and say that's a news article and send that everywhere, it's down to each head to understand how it's broken down, and they may interpret it differently. If you say that's my news article, it has a title, it has a section, it has a subsection, it has this, it has that, then straight away it's much simpler to structure that content. And maybe your native app would say, I don't need to know about the sections, I just want to know the general description. Or you may just say your social channels would just care about the short description and not the whole body, because it will be a link to the article in itself. And you want to do that content and manage it in one place, and not end up doing it and having to change it in every single application. The control of it as well. It's good to have content, it's good to structure your content, but you need to control it as well. You need to control what's mandated content. So if you think about multi-site, multi-language, multi-country, you might want to fix your top navigation on all of your countries, but allow them to have flexibility on your tier 2 items. Or you may want to say, actually encourage countries to reuse content and be able to say, oh, actually, there's this article here that's been written in American English. You may want to type this and just start your version of in UK English and in British English and start editing it and personalizing it to your audience. But this is the same content, which is back to the point I made before, allows you to have an hreflang and a relation between the two, saying that's a primary for US, that's a primary version for UK, but this is Google, the same page. Don't return it twice in your search engine. And there's another couple of pitfalls, roles and permissions. I'm sure everyone's got, yeah, I can't be bothered. I'm just going to have a super admin everywhere. Super admin is going to have superpowers, and superpowers are very dangerous. You need to control that. You need to make sure your local authoring and editorial team have the right access, and they can't start just changing content that could end up being published to your native application without them realizing they've done so. So you really need and have to control this. And developer, everyone's talking about Headless, saying, oh, then you can create new page and your site without developers. That's wrong. That's not true. You will still need developers, but developers need to change the way they work. They don't think about, oh, I'm building this page and this HTML, this structure for that website. It's, I am building something for an editor to use. So I need to think about how the editor is going to use my page, how the editor is going to use my functionality, how is the editor going to structure the content? This is what they need to think about. So it's not that we don't need them anymore. It's we need development at a different time in the process that I talked about before. We need that differently, and we need developers then to change their mindset as well and say, oh, actually, I need to think about who I'm building it for in terms of how they're going to manage it in a position with how it's going to be consumed by my end user. And that's a very different way of approaching challenges. And finally, and I'm very sorry, it's been a long one from me, but finally, the last report here is about editorial understanding and being able to follow your branding and structure your branding, and especially avoiding the use of rich text and HTML text editors and all of the what you see is what you get editors. Control and standardize your content. So that's all for me. I will now hand back over to James, who is going to play the pre-recording we had of Giovanni Moore, who is one of our partners at Argus and who we've been working with for some time now and help them transition into their current environment from a cycle 10.2 to and monolithic to a 10.3 decoupled with a headless Next.js front-end application. So James, I'll pass it on back to you.
Thank you, Fred. Hopefully you can see my screen. One of my colleagues confirm, please.
Yes.
Right, and hopefully you'll be able to hear this as well. Thank you, Fred.
My name is Giovanni, and I work here at Argus Media, VP of Marketing Operations. I've been with the company about 18 months now. We started to embark on a brand refresh, and we need to deliver this brand refresh. We started looking at our technology, how we do this, and we decided to go headless because technology hasn't been touched for a while. However, we have a number of different streams of content coming through, basically, all valuable. We never married it up in the past, and what we needed to do was marry that content up from the different streams so it makes sense for the visitor. It allowed us to put in a matrix that allowed us to put the different types of content together that allowed the visitor to extract what they needed from the site. Yeah, so it was a big step for Argus. It's quite a big site. We have a lot of content. So we have three main streams. One is our news. We have content coming from the editorial, but also we have the marketing content. It goes hand in hand. In the past, it was very flat structured, but we need to put this matrix in place. So we align the content to the commodities and bring those three streams together. So if you have a specific commodity, you can showcase that commodity with the news that that comes out of that, along with the product information. So you can marry that up so that both types of content complement each other. We also wanted to add in another vertical, so industry. Industries look at multiple commodities. So what we did was we used this technology to allow us to manage that content. So the content's now automated. So as the content's produced, it's tagged, and that automatically feeds into the various areas of the site. So if we have a specific page for a commodity, we bring those three types of content to that page. That allows us to give the best user experience. The experience was really good, actually. It was a bit of an eye-opener, and the effort. Had a lot of teams working on this, so we had to get the development teams, the creative teams, and the product teams who create all the content together. One, to get the site developed, but secondly, to get the content onto the actual site. So we had to all work together. It was quite fast-paced, so there was a bit of backwards and forwards on that, and we were putting content in as we were still developing. But we managed to get that done. We had a great partner, Codehouse. But yeah, the experience overall was really good. In total, the project with the brand refresh, probably a year, but the actual development and getting the site up and running, for about 4 months. Okay. What we needed to do to make it happen was initially we went out to get the requirements. So we were in the middle of a brand refresh. That determined a lot of the requirements and direction. Following that, we also had the requirements from the business. So in the old structure, it was very commodity focused. We didn't have an industry focus. We had to add that in. The old site kind of got convoluted around the navigation, etc. So what we had to do was, once we got all those requirements, we could have taken two routes, to be honest. We could have taken just a clean reskin with the existing technology, or go the whole hog where we revamped the whole lot, so rebuilt the whole bit and go headless, etc. But to do that, I need to get the investment. So, and I really wanted to go the whole hog, which would set us up for the future, etc. So we put the plans together. We obviously costed it out, and we asked for investment from the business. So we put the case together, presented that to the senior leadership. That was the first thing we had to do. and then prove to the business what we were delivering was the right way of going. So there was a bit of work around that. As a whole, we got the buy-in, we've done the right thing, and it's now set us up for the future. So not really. I mean, it was fairly straightforward. There was no real major issues. I think there was a little bit of a conversation around licensing or having the right license. Obviously, from the old system, which was legacy, to the new going Headless and the new system, made a change in licensing and how we license Sitecore. But outside of that, it's probably the content migration. I mean, the site's big, and we probably underestimated the time we needed to migrate, but we got there. It was a big push, but we got there. Having this new website has started us on the path of digital transformation. It's immense for the business, for Argus Media. We can now showcase our content in the right way. As I mentioned before, we multiple streams of content coming through. It allows us to bring our news, our content from editorial teams, and our product information together, so it sits hand in hand. Better experience for the customers. Yeah, overall for the business, I think it's great. So we now have an automated website. So putting content on the website in the right places, and the amount we're coming through every day is much more efficient. And it's made the ability to further develop the website a lot faster, being more agile, and we've got some exciting stuff coming through as a result of it. In terms of performance, the website loads a lot faster. It's allowed us to put a more structured, better SEO program around it that's driving traffic to the site. And what we've seen is people are staying on the site much longer. So the bounce rate is a lot less. So the business is extremely happy. Our leadership are happy. We've got a refreshed brand. It's been delivered. The site looks really good. We're driving more traffic to the site. People are spending more time on it. Ultimately, before we started this project, we went through to the business and we gathered requirements from everyone in the business. We've pretty much delivered everything we need to, and more. And as we go into FY25, we've got some really good plans. It's a good question. So we're just finalising our FY25 plans. A couple of exciting things. We want to start using AI, introducing that. So one of the biggest fundamental things is we've got a corporate language translation bot, if you like, AI-driven bot. We're just on the verge of integrating that. So we have an automated AI translation process. So the content in English language gets created, and we can very easily, seamlessly put that into the various different languages. We've got about 6-7 languages we're going to start doing the site. So that means we've got a fully fledged translated site in all the different languages that we cover. Another thing we're looking at is Sitecore search, AI-based search, and that's exciting stuff. So we actually started to bring life to content that's on the site, maybe. So at the moment, so the site's fairly new, to be fair. We've got a lot of exciting stuff coming through. So it's the language wire, we've got the AI search, there's a few other integrations that we're trying to sort out. The focus for next year is more around getting the site working, getting those conversion rates really going, etc., and making sure that we're driving the right type of content. We will, but when that is, I'm not sure. But we've got to get to the site, let it do what it needs to do before we embark on, that we break it again and kind of put it back together. So let's see where it takes us. But yeah, no, it's definitely on the cards in the future.
Great, thank you, Giovanni, for doing that for us. So we're more or less at the end of what we're going to cover today. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for everyone's patience today as well with the technical issues we had. Just a little bit of look ahead. So in the July the 9th, we'll be actually doing a webinar again. So this time we'll be covering design systems and the advantages they can bring to the business. So we hope you can join us for that. Thank you again for your time, whether you've watched it live today, if you've seen the recording as well. And I think with that, we're going to close out today. So thank you very much. And we're finishing on time. Have a great day.